Hello.
Look at you, James Nash.
It's not often that I can wear a tie,
Oh,
so
dressed like a grown-up now. I feel so shabby.
no, it's I have to. If I don't tie a tie once a year, then I forget how to do it. So
I wore a jacket and tie for 5 years, pretty much every day in prep
yeah,
school. And I
yeah,
kind of swore to myself after I was done with prep school that any day I didn't have to wear a tie, I was not wearing a fucking tie.
makes sense.
David Anthony is in the waiting room. Shall I let him in, or shall we keep him
You
waiting?
might as well just keep them out there for a little while.
Well, he's saying I don't have a link on email.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Okay, well here he comes, and we are live on Twitch,
Sounds good.
and we've changed all the metadata and stuff like that. Good morning, Professor Anthony.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, I can hear you.
hear you. We hear you. We see you. You are wickedly backlighted. We have every aspect of David Anthony.
James, you look so groomed. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I
No
was
worries.
just lamenting my own shabby state.
And I just said that if I don't tie a tie once a year, then I forgot how to do it. So this is my once a year.
Excellent.
So we're waiting for Rebecca for RA at this point, and you must be in the East, David.
Yeah, I'm out in Boston for about a week, and then I'll be back.
Because you're the clock behind you is deeply misleading to those of us in the.
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I'm at my brother-in-law's house, and I'm in a little study they have here, and you were right. I'm an hour ahead. So,
Is the weather as scorching there as it is here?
it's hot. It's supposed to cool off in a couple days, but it was.
Yeah, you'll probably get what we're having here today because it's only going up into the 70s today. It's gonna be nice.
Yeah, and then Wednesday or something like that, it's supposed to be in the 70s. But yesterday it was like 92. It's crazy for around here. That's hot. They don't even have AC in this house. They're so unused to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they have these window units. We're all like desperately sitting in front of them, But we went to the beach yesterday to fish because my son is out here. So we did the Father's Day thing, and we had to give up after a while. We were melting out there.
Too hot.
Yeah. And we didn't catch anything.
Yeah, it's been pretty brutal here. We're talking like low 90s every single day, like 100% humidity. So it's been pretty brutal.
Now, where are you, James?
Oh, I'm still in Carbondale.
You're in Carbondale. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I've got these ear things in. They're not working though. I don't know. It's like hit and miss with these things. Right. I think I'll just take them out.
I don't know if I updated you on this, Dr. Anthony, but so I ended up getting the alternate status for Fulbright, which is basically a glorified waitlist. So I'm still in the running, but I take it as sort of soft rejection. So
I was curious. I didn't want to mix things up in terms of topics, but so maybe that means that's you've still gotten pretty far. So congratulations on that. But
yeah, thanks.
Maybe if someone drops out, maybe that kind of thing.
Yeah, that or if they somehow, that's usually how they get extra funding, because that seems to be the issue right now. And I'm not sure, from the research I've done, it seems that Fulbright this year was not surprisingly greatly impacted by COVID. So like in terms of funding, so I heard that a lot of people ended up getting the alternate status. So from a variety of countries. So, but I don't know. And I don't know if I'm going to apply again because I have all the materials. I mean, it seems like kind of silly not to, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, like you say, if you've got all the stuff, maybe it wouldn't be that much effort. And the worst thing that could happen is that they say no, right? So,
Right, totally. So it's just more of a sort of a chronological thing. At this point, I'll have a year
right.
of just to like whatever I do next, and then and then if they do say yes, then I have to I
Yeah,
guess
your
I'm
timing.
right, exactly. I mean, I've kind of built a sort of nomadic lifestyle, but it is it can get jarring after a while, and so I'm still debating. I may, like I said, all the material is still there. It seems, kind of silly not to try it, especially because I got the alternate status. Like if I was outright rejected,
Yeah, yeah, right.
No. That's very smart. Okay, well, we are streaming on Twitch. RA will be here momentarily. There are connectivity issues, but we have a quorum, and we'll be a full committee momentarily. Like I say, we are streaming on Twitch, and I think it is reasonable to say that this is David Anthony's first appearance on Twitch.
I think that is right.
So those of you who love the Neophyte Studios Network Twitch offerings, this is brand new. So hang on, you haven't seen Thesis defense until you've seen David Anthony swinging the bat. So we are gathered together this morning for the formal dispensation of the degree of MFA to young James Nash, who has just finished his 3 years at Southern Illinois University's MFA program in creative writing, a fiction writer. We will talk about the novel that he has committed and other aspects of his time and career here. Over, we'll see over the next hour and 15 minutes or so. These do not need to be. This does not need to be an endless commentary. There are questions I'm looking forward to the answer to. So, James, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thanks.
You look way more professional than your interlocutors do. So I already feel intimidated.
No worries.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
I have a collared shirt on, Pinckney. So
no, you and I should have. It's a sad commentary on the state of things today, David, I think. Okay, so James, well, you and I have spoken a great deal over the past 3 years, and a good bit about your thesis, and I've watched it develop from not even being an idea,
right,
to being this 90,000 word volume that we have in front of us. Not insignificant amount of work on the thesis itself, as well as everything surrounding the thesis. You want to tell us a little bit about the genesis?
Right, sure. So I think there was an idea when we've talked a lot about this, that MFA students come in here and they have this project in mind, and sometimes they pursue it and sometimes they don't. Your recommendation was that a person should probably put that project aside, and I took that to heart, really. And so what the thesis is that idea, but I got to it, I think, through detour, and I prefer it that way, right? So I had this idea of like this sort of semi-autobiographical family, like epic family saga that I wanted to write. I got here and I was like, you know what, maybe I'm not quite ready to tackle this. So took a detour, wrote a lot of things, different genres, and I was just experimenting because I felt like that's what one should do here, is experiment as much as possible, fail as much as possible. And then I would say around, I don't know, midway, maybe the latter part of my second year here, I was like, you know what, maybe I'm going to try that original idea. Maybe I have the tools now to better tackle it. And because I knew it was going to be a lot of work, and it was a lot of work. And yeah, so I guess I got to it in a very roundabout way. So the idea was always there, but I just didn't feel comfortable tackling it right away. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. No, you took a circuitous path, but
Right.
I agree with you that it's a smart way to
Right.
smart way to get there.
Right.
Is to find out whether your project is actually, in fact, your graduate
Right.
project.
And I sort of felt like, because I know a lot of my classmates had, a lot of them had come in with that project in mind, and they tackled it. They're starting their first year, and it worked out fine for them. But I preferred the way I did it. I think that was probably the best way to get at it. So yeah.
Do you have something prepared to read for us? Can you?
Well, I actually have this sort of experimental. I've gotten really into, obviously with all the podcasting that we've done over the years here and audio production. So I created, like, I had a friend, one of my best friends who's an illustrator. He did this little animation that is sort of like, we talked a little bit about adaptations, right, recently. And so it was sort of, he adapted what he felt like was the spirit of a certain chapter. And then I, produced, the vocals, and I scored it. And so that I do have that to share. It's a chapter in the second part. So I can play that now if you'd like.
Let me go ahead and, well, I guess you're going to have to screen share with us, right? That's
Right.
Zoom works. I forget, because I'm on sane platforms all the time. I forget how clunky Zoom can be. But
Right.
yeah, so screen share with us, and we'll and I'll make sure it's spotlight.
Okay.
Running.
So yeah, as I said, this is from, let me get the screen share ready. Here it is. Share sound. All right, so this is from the second part, or the second book, and it's the Shadow in the Evening, Shadow in the Morning chapter. It's the second part, the second scene, and yeah, I'll just let it play. So are you guys seeing this right now then?
Yes, I've got it. And
So
assuming the volume thing, we'll hear it as well.
Yep. So yeah, it's about 12 minutes long, so I'm just gonna hit play. I'm all alone, Maria thinks, when Alex's phone goes to voicemail for the 5th time. She's been home from county for 3 months, yet she still feels like she's locked in jail. Lying in bed, her back propped against the headboard, she faces the TV at the other end of the bedroom. The TV is on, but the volume's muted. She's watching without paying attention. She doesn't want to feel alone, and there are other people in the Petrovsky household with whom she could assuage her loneliness. But she doesn't have the energy to leave her bed, so she lets her mind wander to them. Downstairs, Ditto is feeding Baba. The latter coughs up phlegm, and Ditto turns on the suction machine to clear her throat. Afterwards, Baba groans, and Ditto chides her. She's always groaning, and Ditto's always chiding her. Like her brother, she wonders if there's anyone home upstairs in Baba's brain. The possibility of her grandmother being trapped in her own body, unable to walk and talk and live her own life, is too much for Maria to think about, so she doesn't think about it. From the radio on the kitchen table comes the trilling of a flute and the beating of drums. Soon a woman's voice joins, soft and wavering, sad and forlorn. The music sounds at once familiar and exotic to Maria. Familiar in that she's listened to this music all her life. Exotic in that she doesn't understand a word they're saying, having never learned the language. And because, sonically, it's so different from the hip-hop and pop she usually listens to. In another life, she might have gone to Macedonia, journeyed up the mountains about which her grandfather is always telling stories. The sheep, the high pastures that stretch to the horizon, the sun's slow arc across the blue dome of the sky. That would have been nice, in that other life. In the morning, her grandfather will be the first to find her body. Her skin will be gray-blue. He will try to revive her, yell at her to wake up,
slap her hard across the face, beat against her chest, and finally blow air into her mouth. When the paramedics come, they will have to pull him off of her. They'll tell him that she had probably been dead for hours before he found her. Instead of melodies filled with flutes and drums and accordions that remind him of his village and the mountains of his youth, his lamentations will fill the Petrovsky household every night for months after her death. Maria's vision floats past the kitchen and down the hallway. It curls up the stairs and towards the crack of light in the door of the largest bedroom in the Petrovsky household. Inside, her Aunt Elena is lying in her bed, clutching an empty bottle of Mohawk vodka, the TV casting its white glow across her sunken face, the canned laughter of her favorite sitcom, a lullaby to which she has fallen into a listless sleep. Drinking will get much worse after Maria's death, and in 10 years, she too will perish from fentanyl-laced heroin, holding a phantom baby against her chest. God only knows where her dad is, probably somewhere in Detroit, living out his own stoned existence, shifting in and out of consciousness. The closest she's ever felt to him is the one time they smoked pot together down in the basement when he still lived there. Their conversation unspooled like curls of smoke, stories of addiction, stories of almost overcoming. She realized how similar they are, although Alex had been saying that to her for a long time. Searching, Maria's vision glides over the dark city where she spent so much time, past the looming smokestacks and empty factories, the long and desolate expressways, 20 miles west, back towards the pale lights of Prosperia, to the apartment where Mama used to live, alone, before she died. After Maria's dad, after a string of bad men not so different from Maria's dad, Cindy decided to live the rest of her days alone. But she was never alone with Irish Rose, the cheap white wine she drank to mask her loneliness and her failure as a mother. She had tried, Maria knew. She had worked so hard after the shelter to give her children a life. Somewhere, it had all slipped away, and who can say how or when? The only person she has trouble envisioning with any resolution is her brother. She wonders what he must be doing at this exact moment when he's not answering her phone calls. She knows he's in Ann Arbor, but what he's doing at that moment is beyond her apprehension. Reading, playing video games, hanging out with girls. The last she finds impossible to imagine. Her brother was always strange, always alone. The strangeness and aloneness so entwined it's hard to say what came first. Mama had said that he marches to the beat of his own drum. How Maria sometimes wishes she could hear that drum, but he pulled away every time she tried to get close, talking to her from the top of his high walls, like he could see everything, knew everything. Her vision returns to her bedroom. The emptiness she feels before she dies is indescribable. If she were to attempt to describe it, she might say it is everything. Emptiness is everything, that there is no other feeling beside it. She might say that it is the negation of all feeling. The emptiness is not a new feeling. She's had it for as long as she can remember, and for as long as she can remember, she's tried to escape everything. Anyway, she pulls out the plastic baggie and places it on the bed in front of her. The contents of the baggie have helped her escape, if only for a little while. The color of its contents are nearly the same color as the blanket. She imagines herself going through the motions before she goes through them, like a movie she has seen so many times before. Inexorable is a word that her brother might have used. Would you yell at the movie so that it ended differently? You might rage against it, but the movie will go on to its inevitable conclusion, and the lights will come back on. People will begin filing out of the theater, and an employee will come in to clean up the mess, unstick the gum from the floor, sweep the popcorn strewn about the ground, throw away the half-drunk cups of pop. Then a new crowd will enter, and the movie will start from the beginning. The ending doesn't change, no matter how many times it starts over. The speedball is laced with fentanyl, but she doesn't know that. Neither did the person who gave it to her. The journey of fentanyl that kills her is worthy of another story in and of itself. From China to Mexico, it has traveled a long way to stop Maria's heart. In the aftermath of her death, people will point fingers. Some will say it was Christo's fault for introducing her to heroin in the first place, when she was only 16. Some will lay the blame on poor parenting, a dad who was a bit player in the late 80s cocaine distribution scene in Detroit, and a mother perpetually adrift in the sea of alcohol. Some will lay blame at the feet of her grandfather, who continued to enable her bad decisions, like he had done with his son before her. Some will say it was no one's fault but Maria's. Some will even wonder whether it was not an accident at all, but rather a suicide. But, in a way, all overdoses are suicides, a rejection of life for the promise of the endless dream. Regardless of who's at fault, none will be able to escape the black hole that's left behind.
Maria's not thinking about any of this right now.
She's thinking about how utterly alone she feels. It has been 6 months since she had last shot up heroin. She promises herself that it will be just this one time, even though she can hear the echo of that classic self-deception. The track marks on her arms have faded, her clear skin a testament to her recovery. She decides not to risk visible evidence of her relapse. She looks down at her bare feet. This is not the first time she's used the space between her toes as injection sites for the sake of concealment. Of all the facts about his sister's overdose, Alex will fixate on this one detail. He will fail the LSAT and move back to their grandparents. He will stand in the doorway of her bedroom every night and stare at her empty bed. He will try to imagine the moment she stuck the needle between her toes. He will think on their last conversation, over the phone, how he had ended it after yelling at her. He was yelling at her about how much he and Ditto had worried about her the month after she was let go from county, how they had called the Detroit police and reported her missing, how irresponsible and selfish she was. She never had the chance to tell him what had happened to her in that basement, or how alone and empty she's felt for most of her life, and how heroin has been the only thing that's helped her forget a history of violence and despair. Alex will enter his worst episode of insomnia, one that will send him into the streets of Detroit on a quest of revenge. After she cooks and injects the speedball laced with fentanyl into her toes, Maria lays her head on the pillow. The familiar warmth fills her. She looks outside to see the moon, almost full, bright and pale. The moon, her constant companion. How often she has looked up in the night sky, in the early morning, to see it hanging there. And all around, lonely stars dot the sky, flickering red and blue. It becomes difficult for her to keep her eyes open. When they close, she imagines walking up the slope of a great mountain, her grandfather's mountain. She can see the sheep grazing, distant puffs of white against the green pasture. A dog barks from far away, the scent of lilacs on the wind. Grass is soft on her bare feet, and the sun warms her skin. As she ascends the mountain, she's finding it harder to breathe. It's not long before she knows that something isn't right. The sky begins to darken, her breathing slows, and for a moment it feels like her heart has stopped beating. It feels like a heavy blanket has been placed over her. Panicking, she opens her eyes and sees someone standing in the doorway of her bedroom. A tall woman, like her aunt, but paler in the face, what she could see of it beneath her hood. "Elena?" Maria murmurs. "Help." Maria reaches out to the woman. The woman enters the room and sits beside her on the bed. When each breath is harder than the last, she becomes frightened. She tries to cry out but can't find her voice. Her throat tightens. Somehow, it's happening slow and fast at the same time. Her vision slowly fades, and she knows she is about to die. She feels the woman gently grip her hand. The last thing Maria sees as a single tear run down the woman's pale cheek. In the silence of this exchange, the terror of death leaves her, and Maria Petrovsky is comforted at last.
All right.
Nicely done. The Twitch channel was alive with praise.
Oh wow, I'm not even on it, so that's
Yeah,
good
no,
to
no,
hear.
no. I'm sure you're not. You're not supposed
Yeah.
to be. But I
Right,
couldn't.
right.
I couldn't help
Right.
but check in. There is even someone on Twitch named Nash Fan 7.
Oh wow.
Implies that there are at least 6 other Nash fans
Yes.
out
Yes.
there. And, so
Yeah.
a Nash fan is indeed a fan.
Wow.
So yes.
I wonder if it is actually.
Yep. No, you were being cheered on from a number of quarters over
Excellent.
on.
Well, probably not only for the content, which is great, but I think you know, as a backup career, you could just be a reader for audiobooks or other.
I've been told that I have a good reading voice. I just find it it's still strange, having never really recorded my voice prior to like coming to this program and doing all these podcasts. I still find it a little bit weird hearing my own voice, but I have heard that I possess like.
No, it's
utterly.
Yeah, you do. You're a pretty talented voice actor, because I remember when you were in that podcast project I was doing.
Just with the cheetah. That's my claim to fame right there.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I have had I can talk to James. I enjoy talking to James, but I've had so much opportunity to talk to him about the thesis and about his time here that I will happily kick back and let other folks have a chance to converse with him.
I have questions, but Rebecca, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. So James, we've talked a lot about the kind of the Jonathan Safran Foer influence and negotiating that, taking what you want from him and avoiding what you don't want, right? And I think the comparison is obvious. Alex going to Macedonia and kind of reconnecting with his familial roots. And I'm curious how you negotiated that relationship, because that's a comparison you're inevitably going to get.
Totally.
Right?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? When you publish this. And I just want to hear your thoughts on that, where you stand on that.
Well, before you answer that, because my first question anyway, is so related, maybe you can kind of mix in or, be thinking about what I wanted to ask, which is just about the kind of the links, between the U.S. and Macedonia, and how that informs what you're doing. What would happen if you left it out? Like you have Maria say something about that other life, that she doesn't, and then of course she has the vision at the end of this piece you just read, the chapter. So I'm curious about that, and if that's related to your answer to what Rebecca asked. Great. Absolutely. If not, talk about it afterwards. Yeah.
Oh, it definitely is. I think I would think, and it's been a while since I've read Everything is Illuminated, but from my understanding, a large part of that book, like most of it, takes place in Ukraine, right? So I think one of the main differences then, where I deviate from that work, is that it's like really a tale of two cities. Detroit is as important to the narrative, I think, as Macedonia is, right? As Tetovo is in Macedonia. So I think that's the primary difference, right? But I knew I wanted to create this sort of epic that spanned both space and time. And I felt like the only way to really do that is to include, another location, right? And I guess part of it is just maybe I thought about just keeping it all in Macedonia, but I don't know. So much of it is based, so much of what happens in Macedonia is connected to Detroit and vice versa. So I just felt like if I wrote about Macedonia, I couldn't write that. I also had to write about Detroit as well. They're sort of inseparable, right? So
this would not be as good as if you didn't have the Detroit material, I don't think.
No, I mean, I'm not sure if I could have that would have maybe required, I guess, much more experience with Macedonia. I've been there a number of times, spent but not long enough where I felt like I could really carry a long novel. You know, it would require a lot more, I guess, imagination, a lot more liberty in terms of all the Macedonia stuff. And I still feel like the Macedonia stuff is like a lot of it I've had to like recreate from just like stories that I've been told and from my few times that I've gone there, right? And I was hoping with the Fulbright, right, that it would give me the opportunity to really immerse myself. And I guess it's just, maybe I prepared myself in the case that I didn't go, that I still needed, a setting that I knew very well, that I could articulate very well. So I guess that was part of another reason why I focused on Detroit, because I, spent 23 years of my life there, and in the suburbs and in the city itself. And so I know Detroit way more than I do, Tetovo and Macedonia. So, yeah. So I guess that would be the biggest difference.
Yeah, sure. And I think Detroit is important to Alex, right? In a way that, I forget Stephen Foyer's character's name. I can't remember his name. Elijah?
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either. But like in that, like the US is important to him, right? So it's sort of like it felt to me like the Beast, right? The father, Goran, right. all those characters inhabiting Detroit was not only important to Alex, but important to the book, to make the book work, right? So it's sort of like Macedonia, a little Macedonia in Detroit, right?
Right, exactly.
Right, and it's the way that Alex sort of reacts to that kind of drives him to Macedonia ultimately.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Rather, I think it's a good point. Like, rather than the things in Macedonia driving him to Macedonia, it's really a combination of the stuff that happens in Detroit. And if, once I get to part 3, obviously the sort of things that happen to his great uncles in Macedonia as well. So it's, but yes, definitely the driving force is the Macedonia in Detroit that drives him to Macedonia. Yeah, absolutely.
But let me ask, you sort of answered this, but when you said you wanted to write an epic that spans space and time, which is, provocative and ambitious, but so when you say that, are you saying you started out wanting to do that? And if so, why? Or did it turn out that, the plot you had in mind just necessarily took on that shape? Right? Because then my question would be, so what if you have an epic that spans space and time? Like, so what is that? I think that's technically right, but the question I would ask is, why or to what end?
Right. I'm reminded of maybe the personal statement that I wrote to get into this program, which was, this whole journey has been inspired by my grandfather's immigration, right, to this country, right? Mm-hmm. And I think immigration stories in general, and that's why I've always been attracted to them, because they are like, each one is like an epic, right? Like, they have to travel, often thousands of miles to get to their destination. Often they're fleeing war or famine or better economic opportunities. And each immigration story is like a mini epic. And I mentioned like, the Iliad and the Odyssey as being like, well, that's, my grandfather's story was a bit like a mini Odyssey, right? A mini epic. And so it was, if I was going to capture his journey and the journey of, immigrants like my grandfather, then it just couldn't help but to be a story that spans space and time, right? Because you also have these people that are carrying ancestral trauma that are, and then when they get to their destination, their family continues to unfold over generations. So it's just like, if your attempt is to capture, I think, one man's journey, immigration story, then you just can't help but to like get that like this epic scope, right? Because you are like, in terms of both land and time, it's built into that journey, right? So yeah, I guess it was more like, I wasn't attempting to write this sort of like this epic, but if I was going to write the immigrant story is an epic. Every immigrant story is an epic. So
yeah, no, that's an amazing answer. So yeah.
So maybe you'll get annoyed with me when I ask this question.
No, sure.
It's the autofiction question.
Oh yes.
Yep. My apologies in advance.
No, it's okay. I was ready for it. So
I figured. So it's another kind of negotiation question, right? Where, you know, you're willing to bear on the narrative personal experience, lived
right,
experience, right? And the kind of obviously there are moments of more than just moments, but there's major deviation from, you know, your own narrative. But it's very clear, right, that you've inhabited these spaces, right? And you've said as much, you know what I mean? So I am interested in how you, when you go to revise this, right, and you're kind of maybe taking an approach where, an editorial approach where you're trying to distance yourself somewhat from the material, right? So that you don't write, you're not committed to like a realism or verisimilitude that's like so like closely, or like a naturalism that's so closely associated with the story as it happened,
right,
that you can't end up editing. You know what I mean? Because like,
right,
you know what I mean?
right.
Like you can't be like bearing down on it and in that way. So
Right.
I'm very curious, when you go to revise this, right? What do you see? How do you see your personal experience influencing that? How do you see it influencing it now? How do you see it influencing it in the future, right? How do you anticipate, you know, maintaining that kind of narrative distance that's going to allow you to tool with the narrative in ways you wouldn't be able to tool with it otherwise? Because you just be writing, you know, memoir.
Right. Yeah, and I desperately want to avoid autofiction and memoir-esque like writing. And I think it maybe start. I'll say this. It may have started that way, right? At like obviously writing about the experiences that you know, right? But by virtue, I think one of the things that I find in a lot of contemporary autofiction is that it tends to be first person, you know, just that one narrator, right? Like that's like the hallmark, right, of autofiction. Is like I think I escape that by having all these other characters who, like, I mean, I haven't lived their experiences, right? So that's mostly me imagining what, even if these are people I knew in my life, right? I still have to imagine what their experiences were like because I didn't live them, right? And I did that purposely because I'm, you know, want to write fiction. I don't want to write necessarily about my own experiences. So I, you know, attempt to inhabit these characters and imagine what their experiences were like. And so, yeah, it may have started off with like, yes, I'm writing about things that I factually know, but then, you know, I also wanted to write kind of, you know, I wanted to be a little strange. And I think the most important, one of the most important characters in this is, and thinking about how I'm going to edit this in the future, I see this story not through the eyes of Alex, actually. I see them through Saint Petka. I think that she is the most important character. Like she, in terms for both Alex and myself, she's my muse. This story would not have been possible without her. I would not have wanted to write the story without her, because then it would have been memoir. It would have been autofiction, right? So seeing these events through her eyes already causes this sort of displacement to happen, right? So she functions like, and I've thought about this a lot after the fact, she functions like a Greek muse would function, right? I'm channeling the story and the characters through Saint Petka, and which is why she is present and like pervasive in the story. At first, I wanted her to be like less important, and just come like sort of like the golden mongoose and you know, Diaz's Oscar Wilde, but like, yeah, she is incredibly important in sort of channeling everything that happens in this story. So I see the story through her eyes and not my own. That's the attempt, at least, right? So yeah, so she functions as sort of like a Greek muse would. So,
well, can I ask something kind of that's
sure,
maybe building on or just, you know, that is responding to what you're saying, but that I had been thinking about as I read, which has to do with just basic issues of kind of point of view and narrative perspective, right? So
sure.
The piece you played for us is pretty different from a lot of different most of the chapters, let's say, right? So you're talking about Alex, like it's much more kind of omniscient, you know, he will fail the SAT, and you know,
right.
And so you move in and out of that, and I just wonder if you could just talk about how you're negotiating and will negotiate point of view and narrative perspective going forward.
And I guess this is to also going back to RA's question. It really, a lot of it has to do with, I guess, when I do edit it in the future, it will again be, and I was thinking about doing this originally, and maybe I would have given more time, but I think that like I almost wanted to write from like mostly from St. Petka's, or at least a good, like a lot of the sort of third person omniscient like chapters. I almost want to have them told through St. Petka, all of those to like control that POV, I think issue that you're referring to, right? Because that would, I don't know, like it would make it, I think, more seamless. It would be more consistent, I think. So that is
it's a little free floating sometimes, and I don't think it's bad, but it did make me, because I knew I was, coming to a defense. I was just more like attuned to it, and I was thinking, well, where did that come from? And so what you just said about controlling is an issue. I'm not critiquing, but I'm just saying, I'm aware of it as a reader. Yeah.
Right. No, and I was definitely aware of it while I was writing it. And so again, I think maybe a potential solution to that, RA, would be to, again, channel more of the story through St. Petka, right? Make her more of a sort of like a narrator. And I sort of experimented with that in 2 chapters. The chapters about the parents, Cindy and the Beast. Those 2 chapters are sort of told through St. Petka, right, as the narrator, at narrating that to Alex. And so I think that I may do that with other chapters as well, or may have it implied that these third person omniscient chapters are being channeled or narrated through St. Petka as the muse, sort of thing, right? So and again, to distance myself from the entire narrative experience, I think, and to allow, just to create that medium through which the story is told, I think. I hope that answers your question about future editing.
That answered mine. Yeah.
And autofiction. So, but yeah. So like I said, it started off as being a lot more factual, and then it just happened. Like, I think going back to something I think Pinckney said, that was said to you, Pinckney, by Joyce Carol Oates, and this just stuck in my brain. And I sort of, this was a main operator for me when I'm writing a lot of these scenes. And I'm probably going to paraphrase this badly, but something to the effect of, you have a husband and wife in a kitchen, right? And the story, right, is not, and they're arguing with one another. The story is not that they just argue and then that's the end of it. The story is one of them, the husband or wife, one of them picks up a huge knife from the butcher's block, right? That's the story. And so what I did with a lot of these experiences, a lot of these landmark moments, I guess, that I've experienced or that I've heard about from relatives of mine, what I did is I had someone pick up the knife, metaphorically, right? So so a lot of these are events that like I'm familiar with, that I've either experienced directly or I've known people have experienced, and then I would just nudge them in a direction that is purely speculative, right? Because often maybe the actual event is not, maybe as narratively neat, right? So in many of these cases,
the extraction of the knife from the knife block is the moment that we enter the special world of the story.
Right.
That is the threshold over which we cross, and we know, okay, we are in story.
Absolutely. So I did that often in this. I just made a character.
I mean, it's required, right? I mean,
right, it is required.
As lovely a person as you are, James, I don't want to follow you around all day.
Right.
Watch what you do. I would prefer to think that when I'm not watching you, you're, performing all kinds of perfidy in the flesh pots of Carbondale.
Right. Yeah. But so that's sort of that's again, thinking back about writing this originally, it was that also gets away from the distance, right? Or it puts distance between me as the as the writer and And these characters is I just nudge them in a certain direction that is yet not that has not, and so in some cases I am forced to speculate, right? Because that I wasn't there, right? And so that's kind of it can be interesting too, right? You speculate about what happened to these people that and try to write a narrative around that. So yeah,
I want to go back to the epic idea,
Sure.
because you and I read the Brothers Karamazov together.
Yes.
And it was very fun. And I think like there are moments, so many moments in this book, right, where you have that kind of that sort of theological, or like you have that kind of spiritual or theological or Christian, you know what I mean, presence, right? And I'm thinking too of the Grand Inquisitor. I'm thinking of Ivan's mad ravings, right, about heaven and hell. And I saw, this what we just watched, right, with Maria seeing the saint, right, as she dies. You know what I mean? And the grandfather, having this sort of like visions in the mountains, right? Having these kinds of schizophrenic visions. I'm very curious how that sort of spirituality or that kind of Christian theology is sort of, you see that fitting into the narrative, right? Where it comes from, what it means to you, right? Because I think that's linked up very much with this POV, that's this Saint Pekka thing, right? Where kind of dodging that auto-fictional POV issue by, making her omniscient, making her the omniscient third,
Right, exactly.
So where is the religious stuff kind of fitting in for you? I just want to know more about it, because I was really into it in the book.
Right. That it's sort of like thinking about Saint Petka specifically. It's sort of like creating. It's how I'm, as someone who's not very religious, and I'm not like when we talk about Dostoevsky.
Yeah, we know, James. Look at your own image. Look at the iconography that you have set up in your Zoom.
Exactly.
I think if you just turn that fan onto a slow speed,
it'd be like a halo. It'd be like a halo,
but it's also a halo. That is, you have created the perfect orthodox iconography.
Right.
In this image, I'm not a very religious person myself, says the guy. Cross on his head.
Right. I guess there's just a great fascination and interest in it, right? As like it was never a big part of my life growing up. I was talking to Pinckney about this, but I can't help but to be interested in the icons and the religious motifs and the symbolism, right? It's all very fascinating. And I suppose that, I mean, I think it's expressed a few times in the novel that Alex himself is not religious,
right?
Despite having these experiences, right? And I find that maybe the spiritual aspect of this comes from the innate desire for humans not to feel alone, right? That in like that I've always, this is again I'm not an expert on any of this, but it seems that like if you have someone who is exceptionally or feels alone, that spirituality offers an antidote to loneliness, right? And so like even if you have someone who like Alex, who is a disbeliever, who is maybe atheistic, it's almost like he's compelled to create this sort of external consciousness that is spiritual in order not to feel alone, right? So like again, happens regardless of whether or not one's religious. But yeah, so that's the spirituality is a sort of, it comes out of almost like an emptiness of spirituality among these characters, except for maybe Miroslav, who is like just very much an embodiment of the sort of the spirituality that is a little all-encompassing, that's a little intense, right? That is completely dominant, and like everything he sees is answered through spirituality, right? whereas most of the characters, they are irreligious, right? They're not very, like Goron himself is not very spiritual, neither is Slavica. Like this is a mostly agnostic family, right? And so I think the spirituality is maybe a response to, like, well, what is there then if it's not spiritual? Like, it almost like comes by default it's an answer to the emptiness that these characters
I wonder if that's also would inform some of the tensions between the U.S. and the old world, right? Whether in actuality or at least in terms of kind of belief, right? So the U.S., because the standard narrative would be the U.S. characters are more alienated and seeking meaning, and then they would project onto old Europe a place where you can access some kind of authentic, spirituality or something like that.
No,
that doesn't mean,
I think you're right. Yeah.
And I like this idea of the spirituality sort of supervening on the loneliness, right? And I see it supervening on the addiction too. You know what I mean? Because that, again, going back to that moment, which I found very beautiful, the moment of Maria's death, right? Which devastating, but beautifully rendered. This is a lonely family. This is sort of a wayward family, right? And kind of like Alex is sort of pinballing among members of this family, trying his best to escape. But of course, right, he has limited resources himself. He's not the hyper capable guy he claims himself to be.
Right. Exactly.
So I think that I think the idea of that following from the sort of defects or deficiencies of the family is
absolutely
really compelling. Yeah. Which ties into go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say another question sort of about the drugs, right? And the addiction piece. That's a huge part of this novel.
Right.
And I found that the narrator, right, is sort of like always clear-headed, right? The narration is coming from this sort of omniscient, clear-headed place. But the characters who are being, narrated about, right, are themselves sort of mixed up and high and disorderly. And I think I'm interested in what, not only what it was like for you to kind of inhabit those states of mind, right? But also how, the drug use, the drug abuse in Detroit links up with the schizophrenia in Macedonia, because those are both the altered states are a theme in this book. Right. So that really interests me. That felt to me like another linkage between the US and the old world, right? Like people who are trying to escape, people who are or being forced to escape for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So when you talk a little more about that?
Sure.
No, go ahead. I'll say something after you answer.
I think one of the themes, and I don't like to talk or write necessarily about themes, but like loneliness is definitely pervasive. Like you said, a lot of these characters are lonely. They're wayward. And I think the spirituality and the addiction are both attempts by these characters to fill in that emptiness that they all experience, right? That emptiness that is the result of immigration, right? Like you're spreading yourself in a way physically and spiritually thin by like moving from one location to another. And then, you lose the community you had back in the old world, right? There's a lot that's lost in that process. And it's not necessarily replenished at your destination, right? And I think that's a key feature for this family is that the way I've described this to other, like a lot of the immigration books that the novels that I've read, it's always this maybe idea that once they get here, things will be better, right? I guess that's the narrative, right? The narrative is that this is the promised land. Once you get here, it'll be better. What about a story, I guess in this case, where you're damned if you stay, because who knows? I mean, the people that would have stayed would have been caught up in war if they stayed, and damned if you left, right? So there's really this is not, it's not like just immigrating itself will not solve all of this family's problems, right? And that was a key, I guess, feature for this family, that like they lost things on the way, and what they lost wasn't necessarily replenished in the United States.
But
right?
yeah, let me ask, the last thing you said anticipates my question, which is it immigration or immigration to the U.S.? Because,
well, I mean, I only had the experience to obviously immigrating to the U.S., but like, I imagine this is the case. You know, I think the story of immigration or migration is very much a part of the human condition. I mean, humans have migrated, immigrated, you know, from time immemorial, right? And so it is. I think things are lost in movement, right? And life itself is movement. And you know, you pick up things, you lose things, that happens along this journey, right? And yeah, and so I just wanted to isolate what was lost in this family's immigration, what was gained, what was lost when they got here, you know, and what was gained. And then maybe, you know, that's part of going back to Jonathan Safran Foer's Everything's Illuminated, right? Because again, part of the emptiness inspires more movement, right? Emptiness inspires the movement. It like it inspired the movement to begin with, right? Better economic opportunities, something's lacking in one's life. And so you immigrate, right? Or you're forced to immigrate. You lack the safety, you know, where you currently live. And so you immigrate, or, you know, in Alex's case, you know, he might go to Macedonia because he feels empty in the United States, right? So it's all like the movement is an attempt to fill oneself up, to counter the loneliness, the emptiness that I think is inherent in the human condition, I guess. So yeah. So
well, yeah. Let me ask a question about, maybe overly general, but about, I guess two related things come to mind. I'm going to squeeze them both in. So genre, you know, but also difficult. I'm just curious about your relationship to, or how you would describe the book as far as the issue of difficulty goes. You know, this does not read, you know, it's a complicated web of characters and so forth. Right. I don't think of this as like a breezy, easy read, you know?
Right.
So, so I'm curious, like if you're marketing it, could be that someone in this Zoom room, someone might ask you, how you would pitch this.
I want to hear the pitch. Like, I want to hear your elevator pitch. I want to hear your 60-second pitch. I want to hear, like, you know, I'm a publisher.
Right.
You know, we're circling the drain. All of us. You've worked in publishing, so you know what a disaster that world was while you worked there. It's only gotten worse since. I'm looking to you to save my publishing house. Right. So yeah, I want to hear what's the business of this novel.
Yeah, and that's my question, really. Yeah.
Totally. Well, I suppose that. So, you know, a lot of the topics here are, and I don't like to write toward trends, right? But these places like Detroit, for instance, and Macedonia aren't often talked about very much, at least not in the books, you know, that I've read, contemporary immigrant novels, right? It's not, though, these things are not really talked about. So this is, I would describe this to a publisher as a multi-generational epic family saga, a tale of two cities, Detroit, you know, and Tetovo, Macedonia, like places that, like, again, aren't really written about, right? And it covers, you know, things like you know, you have like this visionistic sort of biblical aspect of this, and then you have the sort of the opioid crisis. You have, you know, you have post manufacturing Detroit, right? So these are all, like, I don't know, I don't want to say they're topical or trendy, but these are things that I think are super important, that they are, you know, very much part of what I think is the American mythos, right? But yeah, so this is, I would describe this as loosely as a epic multi-generational family that spans space and time. A tale of two cities, Detroit, Tetovo, Macedonia.
I want to hear your sales piece, right? I mean, that, you know, that describes very accurately a critical reaction to the book or a,
Right.
but I want to hear, okay, but what am I putting on the cover? Like, what does that look like? What does the back cover matter look like? I mean,
Totally.
besides, your dashing good looks,
Right.
in the author's photo, what's the plot? Like that's, that's the first thing I'm going to ask you about. Well, the first thing, if I'm a publisher, I'm going to ask you about is, what's your social media presence and influence? But
Right.
say we'll skip that because we're at a university. So the second thing I'm going to ask you is, tell me the plot. Like, what do I tell my editorial board? What do I tell my marketing people who are going to be in the meeting, right? At the, when we decide whether to acquire this book or not.
Yeah. That's a good question.
We're
Yeah.
going to say, oh, it's a difficult book. It's all the things that David Anthony says it is. He's 100% correct. It's multi-layered.
Right.
Those are not negatives, right? I mean, they're just
Right.
facts about the book. But then you have to encompass the book in such a way that folks are going to go, okay, but the difficulty is worth it, right?
Right.
In the way that presumably you found the difficulty of Brothers Karamazov worth it,
Right.
right? I
Right.
mean, I'm assuming
Right.
you did.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. So I guess thinking about the Brothers Karamazov and why this may be man, I don't know, maybe a response to that book, or the way the book,
Okay,
that
so
book
it's a
made me-
contemporary
that-
Brothers Karamazov.
right. The way that book made me feel is how maybe I would describe my book, which is an antidote to loneliness, right? Like this is in following this family and getting to know these characters who have had traumatic experiences across generations that maybe as I did feel connected to Alyosha
But you're
or
still
Dmitry.
talking thematically, and I
Right.
will redirect to
The plot
plot
itself.
summary. Like,
Yeah.
tell me the story of this book in a way that I go, dang, I gotta read that thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to sum up. It's so.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm asking you now.
No,
right?
totally.
Because I don't want you
Totally.
doing this in a meeting with a potential agent.
Right.
You need, James, you need comps, right?
Yeah.
You need books that
Probably not the Brothers Karamazov.
not the
Right.
Brothers Karamazov, and you need to avoid saying an epic that spans space and time.
Okay,
because
yeah.
they're gonna laugh at you. Not that it's not true, right? But
Right.
it has a little bit too.
Well,
Right,
is
right.
there a way to pitch
Yeah.
this as, in terms of how it's different from the standard version of this, the genre
Of the genre,
is
right?
it-
The sort of immigrant story. Yeah. No, that is something I may have to
It's
think
like
about further.
everything
Okay.
else is illuminated meets Americana.
Right. Okay.
A
I see what you're
novel
saying.
about the opioid crisis. You've
Right.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Those
Yeah.
things that you say, well, I don't write trendy things, but these things are, I mean, drugs, opiates and religion, that's America, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's certainly the America I grew up in and live in now, right out,
Yep.
not far outside of Carbondale, Illinois.
Yeah.
And it's, and it is pretty epic. Right. I mean, and, and how that generates out of the war, and Macedonia, like, what the hell? Right. Like, I mean, that's really interesting, but most people couldn't point to Macedonia on a map. Right. And what I know about Macedonia is like Philip was a big jerk.
Yeah.
So I mean, like there's a lot of exploitable, interesting stuff there.
Totally.
But one of the things that interests me, about Twitch, about stuff like that, right, is in the MFA we get reflected a lot, and our interests get reflected a lot, right? And I have loved this conversation. I have enjoyed it,
Right.
but it is a conversation entirely within the academic realm. Right. And so now that you're right, I'm about to kick baby bird out of the nest.
Right.
Yeah, by filling out this paperwork, which I will send to my fellow committee members. So my concern becomes you are no longer going to be favored with your reflection.
Absolutely.
Right? You are no longer going to be surrounded by James Nash fans who want to talk to you about the themes of your work. until
Right.
it's published, right? It gets out there, it gets out in the world. RA, people want to talk to her about the themes all the time, right? I'm
Right.
sure, I'm confident, because you get to have these conversations again
Right.
later in your career, but you don't
Absolutely.
get to have them at the beginning of your career, because you got to
Right.
start your career somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just a crash thing. And I know,
No, I realize that.
I
Yeah.
crashed
Well,
at
yeah.
his party.
I would say even, and you know this from working in the book trade, even then when the book is out, most readers aren't thinking about themes on a very complex level. And when you
Yep.
try and offer them up in the conversation,
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
veil starts to fall,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, and reasonably so, right? I mean,
Right.
we're a pretty specialized bunch of weirdos.
Right.
And the stuff that we interest, I mean, it's like, I remember having the realization, 25 years into my publishing life, in a workshop, we were having a conversation about, this story's in the present tense, should it maybe be in the past tense or the future tense or something? And I just realized, like, I had never had that conversation with anybody outside of a creative writing workshop. Nobody cares if your novel's in the present tense or the past tense or the future tense. Like, it all just becomes a substitute present, right? Once you get accustomed to what present action is like. I mean, it's worth thinking about as a writer, right? I mean, that's a craft thing, and it's a discussion that's worth having, but we overemphasize a lot of things that matter to us
Right.
that the world really just doesn't care about, nor should
Absolutely.
they. And even if they should, we're not going to change them, right?
Right.
So, yeah, just give me like a 5-line plot summary, like what happens that's interesting. And don't tell me anything about feelings or themes or generality. Like, I want, like, Bob goes into the grocery store and gets shot in the back of the head, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So family, immigrates to the United States for better opportunities. They lose a lot along the way, suffer.
So you're skipping Macedonia, and Macedonia,
Right.
like, what is Macedonia? Like,
Yeah.
I bet you 2/3 of your readers will think you made it up. Right? They're going, Macedonia, that's a silly name.
Yeah. So family obviously immigrates from Macedonia, right? Small landlocked Eastern European country, right? That no one knows about, no one's ever heard of, right? It's inconsequential in world affairs. It's remote, just a country that no one knows about. They immigrate to Detroit, land of opportunity, auto capital of the world for economic opportunities. Family disintegrates upon, immigration, right? It just yeah, there you go. Right.
I can hear the whoosh. Finger went across.
I couldn't help it. I just noticed that map on the
Or how about a family, a family's journey from the remote mountains of Macedonia to the, gridded streets of Detroit.
But Macedonia, right? A once great kingdom.
I mean, I mean, once great, that many years ago. And actually, obviously I mentioned, that's part of the identity issue.
Haunts Macedonia, right?
Right. Absolutely.
In the same way that what Detroit was haunts Detroit now.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's plot, right? That's not theme. That's plot, and that makes sense out of plot.
And what's the moment? What's the historical moment? It's war, right? As Pinckney was saying, auto industry has fallen, America has fallen. Yeah.
Yep.
Milosevic is
They come from the land of of Philip and Alexander,
right?
But I mean, like shepherds living in the ruins of Rome, in the first millennium. It's like, how did that happen?
Right.
And it must be like that in Detroit now, or I imagine it is.
Yeah, no,
for sure. Detroit.
Yeah, no, it's sort of like you're living in the shadow, like the shadows of the past, right? Searching for something and not finding it, So that's, in both instances, right? You're living in the shadow.
So that's parallelism of plot. You've got to leave, this once great place because it's paltry now, and not only paltry, but dangerous.
Right.
And so you go to another great kingdom, yeah, and it
Yep.
becomes paltry and
Yep.
dangerous.
Yep. Absolutely.
So then the
Yep.
question is, are we what makes it paltry and dangerous? So, right? Like, is that, are we carrying a curse?
Absolutely.
That's an ancient plot line, right?
Right.
That's an ancient story that just is intrinsically
Absolutely.
capture people.
Yeah.
So, okay,
Yeah,
well,
I guess I'm gonna have to refine my pitch a little bit, so I apologize.
yeah, no, but it's worth knowing, right? It's worth
right.
knowing that your pitch sucks.
Yeah.
Like your book is way better than your pitch.
Right.
And your book deserves a better pitch.
Right.
Right. Because unless you can pitch your book, and I don't, like I say, I don't mean that in some crass way, but
I understand.
I mean, it's perfectly reasonable for busy people to go, can you tell me, quickly why this book would make a profit for us?
Right.
Right. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable question.
And then quickly, a yes or no question. Nothing more than just the one word answer. Does this have a slice to your mind, of magical realism in it?
Yes.
Okay.
Genre-wise, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how I would identify this completely.
Okay. Yeah.
Non-materialist novel. Well, that was when I became interested in your work. Was it when it exited the purely material?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And I remember that, I think it was in our first workshop together. That I just was like, I don't know who this Nash guy is. I know he's in publishing, whatever. And then all of a sudden the Enochians, the
Enochites, yeah.
What?
The Enochites,
yeah. Right. Show up, and I'm like, oh, I like Enoch. I'll start paying.
Right.
Now.
Right. And that's the kind of work I've been drawn to, like I
yeah, you talked about Obrecht, that Tiger's wife, right?
Exactly,
I mean,
right.
That might be a point of reference.
Absolutely. Murakami, Marquez, these are, I just, you could recapitulate these things in realist terms, right? But that doesn't interest me as much. I that's just retreading, places I've already been, and I don't want to do that, right? I want to analyze these things through a different lens, I suppose, and that's where magical realism comes in for me.
Mm-hmm.
So.
All right. Well, I, as director of the thesis, feel that we have, so I suppose as chair of this committee, feel that we have done due diligence. I have enjoyed this conversation in its various parts and feel satisfied not only that the book is acceptable, but that your defense of it shows that you understand everything you're doing except how you might make a living at it. But whatever.
But you can do voiceovers for people, so you're all set.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, we'll be listening to both hear James the same way that I hear Ballard in my head now, because of Night of Another Sort. So, generally speaking, in the past, what we've done is we've cast folks into outer darkness, but since we're broadcasting on Twitch, that doesn't, I don't want to shut the Twitch stream down and turn it on again unless folks want me to, but I am more than willing to sign the paperwork that will grant you the degree of the Master of Fine Arts. Is there objection in the committee or further?
No objection.
Okay, very good. Very good. Yeah, we've graduated people way worse than you. No question.
And not many better, I would say.
No, I agree. I think it's a monumental amount of work, and you're a good representative of it, and a good representative of the program. And I'm eager to see where.
I just want to thank you guys all for your support. I mean, this wouldn't have been possible without you guys. So I really, really appreciate all the support over the years.
I agree. It would not have been.
Yeah.
You've languished in it.
Yeah.
So we saved you from that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, we're good at that. All right.
Well, stay in touch.
I will.
Yeah, James, reach out. You have all our emails. I don't know if you have my Gmail, but yeah, reach out whenever you need.
I will. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you have my phone number.
Yeah, I do.
You have my phone number too.
That's true. Right. That's how tight we are.
Yeah.
You don't have mine. Let's leave. We're gonna draw the line somewhere.
We'll just keep that distance. That's a good distance. Okay, well, very good. Well, so David and RA, please look for the paperwork to come flying at you.
Send it to me last, because I'll sign off and send it to Joyce. How's that?
Okay, fine. Well, then what I'll do is just send it to RA.
Yeah.
And then it can come to you.
Because it has to go one at a time. Yeah.
Okay, well, very good. James, thank you very much for making this defense easy and for making your
Great job.
Yeah.
James.
Round of applause. I feel confident that the Twitch channel is exploding with congratulations, but I've turned it off because it was too distracting. So very good. Thank you, and thank everyone, and well done and congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks again for doing all this.
That was my pleasure, man. Could not have been simpler or easier or more pleasurable.
Yeah, I'll definitely work on that pitch a little bit more.
Dude. Well, I knew it was going to be a disaster, so I left it. Just because the rest was so good, we had to have one stumble.
Right. Well, thanks anyways, and I'll probably chat with you again soon. So.
Yeah, you'll be in touch. Like we're gonna, it's talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.